Hi, in this video I'm going to demonstrate pathfinding in a 3D environment. I'm going to use Recast and Detour, which has been integrated into my Decade engine. Recast and Detour is an open source library written by Mikko Mononen. It's available on GitHub. There's a link in the description below. I've also added a link to Mikko's blog, which sort of has a good history of the development of Recast and Detour over the past 4 years. There's lots of good information there, so if you're interested in pathfinding, definitely check it out. Even though you'll probably never see this video, I'd like to take an opportunity to thank Mikko for releasing this library open source. It's a really cool piece of software, and it's enabled me to add pathfinding to any arbitrary 3D geometry very easily. So as per the Recast and Detour documentation, I'll give you a quick description of what they are in case you haven't heard of them before. Recast is a state-of-the-art navigation mesh construction toolset for games. It's automatic, which means that you can throw any level geometry at it and you get a robust mesh out. It's fast, so it's a quick turnaround for designers. I think in legacy games, level designers have to manually add waypoints to the level geometry, and if anything changed, they have to then go and manually move all of them. Using Recast, it procedurally generates all of this for you. So your level changes, you quickly put it through a process which generates a new navigation mesh, and you're ready to go. Recast presents its data in a binary blob, so you can either at runtime use Recast and pass that data straight off the Detour, or you can save out that binary data to disk. The level you can see in front of you now is about 1.5 by 1.5 kilometers, and the navigation mesh for it is 8.1 megabytes. On a modern day computer, that's loaded in a fraction of a second. If memory serves me right, I think it took Recast about 48 seconds to generate the navigation mesh for this level. So the Recast process starts by constructing a voxel mold of the level geometry and then casting a navigation mesh over it. The process consists of 3 steps: building the voxel mold, partitioning the mold into simpler regions, and peeling off those regions as simple polygons, which are used for the navigation mesh. Recast can be used in sort of 2 main ways. The first is known as solo mesh. This is good for sort of small levels. If you had sort of single rooms or a small building, it treats the entire environment as one unit and generates a navigation mesh that spans the entire environment. A slightly more complicated way, but a more usable way, is to use their tiled method. This partitions the world into separate tiles, and each tile can be generated independently. This is great if you have a big world and you only want to have navigation data for the areas that are immediate to the player, and it would also be great for if you were generating a procedural world and you actually didn't know at load time what was going to be in your environment. So as the player moves forward, it can generate the navigation mesh for the areas that are a certain few steps ahead. I think if I remember rightly, Mikko's performance showed that to generate the Recast data for an average tile took between 25 and 50 milliseconds. So on screen now you can see my visualization of the navigation mesh. This is using the tiled method. Into Recast, I pass a number of parameters, such as the player's width and height, the max step they can take, the max slope they can walk on, and then some more mesh-specific values, such as the max length of a polygon edge, the max number of vertices per polygon. I can't remember them all right now, but if you download the Recast and Detour demo app from the GitHub account in the link below, you can play around with it and change all these values at runtime and rebuild the mesh and see what happens. So now that we've sort of quickly covered what Recast and Detour is, let's have a quick example of what it can do. So I'm sort of looking for a good area to place a target. There we go. So in here, in the middle of all the buildings, I'm going to place my desired target. So let's have a scoot across to the opposite side of the city, so that we're pushing sort of Recast to its, well, actually it's not pushing it to its limits, it's only pushing it to its limits so for this world. But if we add a zombie here, you can see that immediately he starts scooting off. Let's speed him up a bit so we don't have to sit here for an hour and watch him stumble along. So you can see that he's applying to the layout of the land. He's avoiding buildings, he's avoiding walls, and he has found his path to the destination, and on he's going to trek until he reaches it. So in this example, I have removed trees and bushes from the navigation mesh generation process. My player will be able to run through the bushes and the trees. So I wanted the agents or the NPCs to have the same ability. I've also written an overload to the recast build function. There's a recast function for marking the walkable polygons, and when I first ran it, it marked these river polygons as walkable because it didn't know that they were water. So when I'm passing the 3D geometry to recast, I also pass it a flag for every polygon, which specifies whether it's walkable or not, and after it generates its list of walkable triangles, it ensures that none of the ones that it says are walkable, I say are unwalkable, and if there is a conflict, it will make them unwalkable. So now the agents can't walk across the river. Previously, that zombie probably would have come down here, across the river, and up. So you see there pretty flawlessly, he reached his desired target. That spanned the entire diagonal of the city, and there was no delay, no lag. Another cool thing that Detour supports is crowd management. So if I add, let's add a handful of zombies here, joining our first guy. And let's place the target up here on the bridge. So there they all are, they've all set off. As you can see, some of them are taking slightly different paths. Thankfully, the agents don't all follow an identical path. That would look pretty bad if they did. So the third feature I want to show you about is, I think I got her fast, is something called temporary obstacles. So when Recast generated the level mesh, these obstacles weren't there, but I am adding them to the Detour segment, and Detour is rebuilding this tile at runtime. And it's the agents realize they can't actually get up there, so they're finding the next closest path. So I'm going to block them off here as well. So again, they've recalculated their shortest path and are now going to come underneath and up this section, I would think. See, they still happen to find a good path to the destination. So after this crowd come up, I'm going to block it off entirely so we can see what happens if there is actually no, if Recast can't find a path. So as Recast, well no, actually it's Detour. As Detour is processing, it looks a certain number of steps ahead. So that's why the first crowd here have turned around, whereas the second guys, well, they just have now. So they're going to retrack their steps. Because they can't find a path to the destination, they try and get as close to the destination as they can. And because in this case that the target is on an overpass, they ultimately think that the closest destination is underneath it, so they'll hang around there. There is in fact a way to get up here, but it shows one of the, I'm hesitant to say flaws, but it shows the fact that Detour isn't 100% accurate. It's probably a depth-first search of the navigation mesh, and because it's scanned out in every direction to a certain depth, looking for a way to get to the target and hasn't found one, it stops and chooses the closest location. However, because these ones at the top have a very limited area on where they can move, if we actually put the target back down on the ground, they will find a way down to it, as we should see now, I think. Yep, off they go. So as you can see, down here there's a road that should take them onto the ground. They can loop around and across this bridge. So there you go. Detour will sometimes be able to find a path from A to B, but can't find the same path from B to A, depending on the navigation mesh it has access to.